Kathy Lawrence, a sewing advisor for Crafting Change. One of the things that I love to do is to upcycle clothing into other projects. Not only is it good for our landfills, it's a wonderful way to get creative in your sewing. Today we're going to make our Crafting Change Walker wheelchair tote bag, but this time we're going to use parts of an old pair of jeans to upcycle this project. This tote has denim accents for the front pockets, the back pocket, and the hanging tabs. And it also opens for plenty of storage on the inside, and it still has the ties on the side to attach for stability. Now this is a neat project. Are you ready? Let's go have some fun. You'll need the following notions for this project: scissors, a little snipper, a point turner, some good quality polyester thread, and something to mark with. I like to use tailor's chalk. There's a sewing gauge, and don't forget your needles. If you're making just a regular bag, a 90/14 will work. If you're making one with denim accents, then switch on over to a jeans denim needle. At least a 90/14 and possibly a 100/16 depending on how thick your material is. You can cut out your pieces with your scissors, or if you have one, certainly you can use a rotary cutter. Now the material needed for this project are 4 pieces that are 18 inches wide by 14 inches high. 2 are for the outside and 2 are for the lining. In this project I use the same material, but I'm just running them one cross and one lengthwise. For the front pockets, you're going to want a piece of a denim leg. Now make sure that your leg is at least 18 or 19 inches around, because when we cut this open, this is going to be the pocket. It has to fit across the width of the material. You'll also need a back pocket that we'll put on the back of the tote, and try to get one that does not have the rivets at the top. Otherwise you'll have to pop those rivets out and they might leave some holes. So this is just a lot easier to get one that's sewn on, and we'll trim that up later. And then for the hanging tabs, just 2 pieces of scrap denim that are 5 inches wide by 10 inches long. And we're going to do these a little bit different than last time, so you don't need as wide of a piece. Also, you'll need 2 pieces that are 26 inches long of double fold bias tape for the ties. And on this project, we're going to need 10 inches of 3/4 inch wide hook and loop tape that is a sew-on, not a sticky back. Now, if you're into upcycling or recycling, I love doing this to incorporate some old jeans or maybe something the knees wore out of. You could still use the bottom of the leg. So I've cut this off about 10 inches from the bottom of a pants leg, and this is what I'm going to call the pretty seam. That's the one that we want to have showing, and this is the one that we really don't care about, so that's where we're going to cut these pants apart. Now remember that you have to have these wide enough to go across the tote to be used as the pocket, so we need to make sure that we've got at least 18 inches of usable width here. So just cut those open, and now you can imagine that we've got the top here, here's the bottom, and here's the sides. Let me get the piece out that we're going to be putting that on. And here is the front of the outside of my tote. And so we're going to just line this up and see if we can make that even here. I want to make sure that I've got enough on either side, and I do. So let's see if I've got it about even from the top here. That's about a 5. This needs to come down just a hair. And once I'm happy with where the placement of the pocket's going to be, then what I'll do is just go ahead and pin that denim on. Don't worry if you got a little bit of a curve here, because that's natural if you're using denim, especially the bottom of the pants, the hem. So don't let that throw you. So that looks pretty good. Now to trim that off, I'm just going to turn it to the back side. And then go ahead and cut away any of this denim that I don't need. And that way I've got that evened out with that front pocket. And I can set that aside until I'm ready to work on it a little bit more. And so that's how I match the denim leg to the front of the tote. Next, I'm going to show you how to get that back patch pocket ready to go. This is just a pocket that I've cut out around the back. I've left some material here. Now, what you don't want is you don't want one that's got rivets up here, because you won't be able to stitch this onto the tote unless you pop the rivets off. So it's a lot easier just to go with one that's been sewn on. But what I'm going to do with this is take your scissors and start trimming around the inside close to where that top stitching is on the pocket. What you're trying to do is just cut away the excess denim. And then on the outside, I'm just going to slide my scissors at an angle next to, but not cut through, that top stitching. I'm going to try to slide them like right underneath where that fold of denim is, and trim it so very close without going into the actual denim. Now if you did, don't worry about it. You can use a little fray check on there, or just let it go. I suppose that's what everybody likes now, is the frayed look. But that's how you get that pocket ready to go. And on this pocket, when I go to stitch this on to the back, I'm just going to use regular blue thread, and I'm going to stitch right next to this along the outside. You can also stitch in between this gold top stitching with a navy thread, and it'll disappear into the material and you won't be able to see it. Now you can use top stitching thread with that, but I find that it gets really thick up here where this is. So usually on my back pocket, I just use a regular thread and stitch it on in between that top stitching. Now the third thing that I'm using for denim are the hanging tabs. Now I cut these narrower. I cut them at a 5 because I'm not going to go double, because it just makes them too thick to sew and to work with. So on my denim, I just narrow them down to about 5 inches, and then I just fold this so it meets in the middle. And as you can see, I've serged the outside edges of those, which is fine. That keeps it from fraying. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm not going to do that double fold. It gets too thick with the denim. So just clip that. And then when I go to stitch this, I'm going to fold this end up just close like this and stitch across the ends. So I'm going to use top stitching on these tabs, the heavy duty Performance cotton wrap polyester. It's the Lee Gold color, Perform X from Waywack. I'm going to stitch down here. I'm going to stitch across and stitch up. Then I'm going to put another row of stitching in the middle just to make it decorative. So I'll have 4 rows of stitching. I'll close this bottom, but then again, you don't have to close the tops. So that's how I'm going to do my denim. Coming back to my front pocket, we're going to look and see what we want to do. You can divide this by stitching it right down the center line here and having 2 big pockets, or you can again do 3 sections. You can make this into 2 smaller ones and then leave this one big, what I think I'm going to do is I think I'm going to stitch here and have these two smaller ones, and then I'm going to stitch over here and have one bigger. So for my design, I'm going to stitch here and over here. But this is your project. You can decide where you want to make those pocket dividers. I've switched to my jeans denim needles, a size 100/16, in order to do the stitching on the denim. Now, if your machine is breaking threads or maybe it's skipping stitches, try going up a size in your needles because the heavier material requires a larger size needle. Also, if you're doing top stitching with top stitching thread, you'll need a larger size needle. When I sewed the top stitching on for the pockets, I start at the bottom, I come up to the top, pivot, and come back down again. That makes a nice pronounced little top stitch seam, plus it secures it a little bit more here at the top where there'll be more stress on it. And I also sewed the pocket back on the back of the tote bag, and that I used regular thread and went in between the top stitching lines, and again reinforcing at the top where it needed it. And then lastly, I went ahead and I did the velcro flaps and just did 4 rows of top stitching, making sure I stitched down that raw edge. Now the next thing that we want to do is we want to take the outside of the bag and we put it right sides together, and we're going to sew this bottom seam. So I'm going to go to my machine and sew this bottom seam, and then I'll show you how to prep the bias tape. To prep the bias tape, what we want to do is to sew this edge down to make it sturdy for a tie. But then there's always that problem of turning this end under and not having things poke out. Well, here's my trick. I take the scissors and I go from the fold edge up to the corner and snip that off. Just a little triangle, snip it off. And then when I open it up, and I can fold these little bunny ears in, and they all fold in without having anything stick up. And so I'll do that on both ends of this tie. Here it is open. Go from the fold up to the point, snip it off, and then when you go to push it in, just push it in, and those points go in just perfect like that with nothing sticking out. So then you'll sew across the edge all the way down and across the other edge, and do that for both ties. I've sewn the front to the back of the bag, right sides together, and now we're going to put those ties down in the corners there. Take one of the ties, fold it in half, find the center point, and put that fold right along this outside seam here. Give me just a little bit hanging over, like 1/4 of an inch, and then pin that down right here where the front and the back of the bag meet in the seams. Now repeat that for the other side. Find the center, place that in the fold with a little bit of it hanging over, and then go ahead and pin that down. Now we're going to turn our attention to the back of the bag, right above those pockets, and this is where we're going to pin on our straps. Now with your sewing gauge, measure in 3 inches, and then take one of your straps and put it right side to the right side of the back of the bag. Give me a little bit of a overhang up here, and then go ahead and pin this down. And do the same on the other edge. Come in. So you would take this to the machine, fold it here with right sides together, and then you're going to go ahead and sew the side seams. Now down here is where that tape is sticking out, so make sure that you stitch back and forth over that a couple times, and then when you come up to where the beginning of the pocket is, you'll want to go over and back of that a couple times, and then of course when you get to the top, you'll come up and back and lock that down. We're going to go ahead and prep the lining. Now the lining here, this is my top of the lining up here. Here's the bottom of the lining here. And on one of the sides, you're going to leave a spot open about enough to get your hand through, and you're going to sew the lining front to the back, right sides together, and you'll sew starting here at the top. You'll sew down to where you're going to leave it open, stop, back stitch, jump over that, and then start again here, back stitch, go to the corner, go all the way across the end and up the other side and lock stitch it. Now that we've got our bags, outsides and insides sewn together at the sides and the bottom, and the lining sewn together, leaving an opening for turning, we've got the corners clipped. We're going to turn the lining right side out, side of the bag, and then take the lining, and with the right side of the lining showing, we're going to take it and put it inside of our bag. Go down and match up those corners on either side. And then you can match up the top of the bag, the side seams to the side seams. Give it a good shake. And then we're going to go to the machine. After we've pinned or clipped the lining to the outside of the bag, we're going to go ahead and sew all the way around the top of the bag. And when you get to the straps, again, this is a stress point, so sew over and back over those straps. Once you've got that sewn together, we're going to reach in and pull out the lining and look for that spot that you left open for turning. Here it is. Now go ahead and reach inside and go all the way down and grab one of those ties that you sewed to the bottom of that bag and start turning the bag right side out. It might take a little wrestling with it because you've got some denim in there, but you can do it. Now pop those ties out and smooth everything around. We need to find that hole that we left open for turning, and then just put your fingers right there in that seam line and kind of pop it so those seam allowances are on the inside. And I'm going to put some pins in here to mark where this is going to need to be sewn shut. And you have the option, you can do this by hand, or I like to do it just by machine because you won't be able to see it. It's the lining, it'll be on the inside. So I'm going to edge stitch, back tack here, edge stitch right along this opening to sew it shut. And I've sewn that opening shut right along the edge. And now this lining is ready to go back to where it belongs, inside of the bag. So tuck the lining down in there, push the corners into the corners. And then it's time to get that top edge pretty. Take that seam, top seam, and roll it between your fingers until that seam pops out, and then either pin or clip that all the way around, because what you're going to be doing is top stitching around the outside of this bag around the top opening. And while we're there, we can finish up by doing the velcro. Now I've cut my velcro into 5 2-inch pieces, and I'm going to put the hook portion up here on the strap, covering up the edge of where I sewed the end under. I like on these heavy bags to use 2 strips to make sure that that stays attached and doesn't pull out when there's something heavy in it. And so you'll sew those 2 onto the wrong side of the strap, and then bring that over, line up this strap, and put the appropriate pieces down here and stitch those on. And repeat that for the other side. And then you'll have one piece left over that you'll want to find the center of the bag, and then put your Velcro, one piece on each side, stitch through all the layers, and that's what keeps that inside opening closed. And here we are. the Crafting Change Walker Wheelchair Tote using upcycled denim. Now, a quick note on the top stitching thread. I have better results when I put my heavy duty thread on the top and use regular thread in the bobbin. Now, your results may vary, so please test sew on a scrap before you start. I want to thank you so much for sewing with me today. I hope you found this video useful, and I hope you had fun. And if you have time, I hope you wander over to www.craftingchange.org and see what we are all about. Our craftivists sew, knit, and crochet to help those in need. Thanks, everybody, and take care.